Hey, this is Doug Pointer. I'm with the School of Success. Over the past 10 years, I've helped hundreds of folks land that next job or career through corporate outplacement. And while working with those guys, I noticed something that seemed to happen over and over. They would move into a job with a career focus, and then in 6 months or so, they would want to be moving out of that job into the next thing. And in fact, it's a trend that I've noticed all across the board at all levels lately. And so I was speaking at an HR meeting several weeks ago about the need for outplacement and how those services create and foster goodwill and might even help reduce the likelihood of wrongful termination lawsuits. And after I spoke about that and took questions, the leader of that meeting threw the floor open for other topics. And he actually introduced the first one. He said, I want to talk about turnover. Who thinks it's an issue? And with the exception of one HR leader, everyone in that meeting agreed that turnover, even in a better economy, is a huge issue. So before we get started, let me just introduce Maria Keckler, who started out as a sweatshop worker in Los Angeles. And she's come a long way to develop a reputation as a bridge builder and a catalyst of movements that lead to employee engagement and increased capacity for high potentials, emerging leaders and teams. Maria is the founder of Superb Communication, a San Diego-based agency, and she's the author of Bridge Builders, How Superb Communicators Get What They Want. In addition to her work as an executive coach and a corporate trainer, she's regularly rated as the best speaker we've had for keynotes and breakout sessions across the US, Mexico, and Eastern Europe. So I'm going to step out of the way here and introduce you to Maria Keckler.
Doug, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm excited to be here talking about a topic that is very close to my heart. Now, the real story behind turnover is more like the $11 billion story behind employee turnover and why it is time to rewrite the numbers. So let's begin here. You mentioned that I started on my journey as a sweatshop worker, and that is absolutely true. But that is also relevant to our presentation today because turnover really has a lot to do with what I call a sweatshop syndrome. Employees showing up every day to work, disengaged, wishing they weren't there, and employers who have to deal with the repercussions of low productivity, low engagement, and employees looking to leave. And frankly, that is a very, very expensive problem because a disengaged culture is a costly culture. In fact, the total cost of losing an employee has been added up to about 1.5 to 2 times an annual salary, but it can also go as high as 400% if you can believe that. Now, $11 billion is lost annually to turnover in the US alone. And when we think about these numbers, really, those numbers tell a story. Now, before I get to that story, I want to address 3 common misconceptions that employers have when it comes to dealing and addressing the cost of turnover. The first one is that the problem is too big to tackle. Second, that the problem will work itself out. And thirdly, that predictable solutions are not available. And I am here to tell you that all of these misconceptions could not be further from the truth. However, what I have found is that the stories we believe always win. If we are going to rewrite the story, we need to change the story we believe. And if you forget everything I say today, I want you to remember this, that the bottom line to reducing the cost of turnover comes down to rewriting the numbers by bridging story gaps. When we bridge the gaps, we rewrite the story. And this will make sense more as we move along. So in this short time that we have together, I want to cover 3 key ideas. The story that nobody wants to talk about, the Epiphany Bridge solution, and I want you to leave this presentation feeling, you know what, I can do this. So let's tackle the first one. What is the story that nobody wants to talk about? Well, I already talked about the $11 billion cost to turnover. But there's a number that is even more significant, and that is the cost of depressed employees that stay in our companies and are not ready to leave yet. Depressed employees cost companies $44 billion annually because they are disengaged, actively spreading negativity in the workplace, and ultimately leaving a wake behind them once they leave. So the story that nobody wants to talk about is really about disengagement. Only 13% of employees around the world are actively engaged at work, and more than twice that number are so disengaged that they are likely to spread negativity to others. Now, this is not big news to employers because in a recent survey, 79% of employers believed they had a significant retention and engagement problem, and 26% of them see it as urgent. And on the flip side, we also know that 77% of employers do not feel they have the right HR skills to address the issue, and 25% see it as urgent. So the story is clear. When we have a culture of highly engaged employees, we have a happy culture and also a profitable culture. And the opposite is also true. When we have companies with disengaged employees, we see more turnover, more absenteeism, and profits go down. But the real question is, how do we bridge the gap? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, isn't it? So let's talk about the Epiphany Bridge solution at a high level. At this point, it may be helpful if you think of the relationship that you have with your employees as a marriage, because truly that's what it is. And as any marriage, there is going to be a honeymoon stage where everything is wonderful. You're looking at this relationship through rose-colored glasses. You imagine that you're going to be together forever and that everything is going to work out. But behind that story, there is another story that 87% of employees aren't fully committed to the job for the first 6 months for a number of reasons. They're still receiving offers. They're still unsure about their career path. They're testing the waters. This creates a huge wall or a huge obstacle for you, the employer, because you want to be able to get to the results that you want to achieve. Higher market share, lower cost, more productivity, better customer service, more sales. And when your employees are not fully in, that presents a huge obstacle to reaching those goals. Now, from the employee perspective, they see the culture as an obstacle to getting to what they want, whether it's job satisfaction, more impact, climbing the ladder, and they don't know how to do that yet. And so what we see is these gaps in the two stories. We have that honeymoon stage and we have that achieved vision in the far future. And when we don't anticipate that those rose-colored glasses are going to come off, that presents a huge problem. Your employees can stay and contribute to that $44 billion drain on the company of unhappy employees, or they can leave and they become part of that $11 billion drain of turnover. When we as employers anticipate these hurdles along the way, which are going to happen, by the way, we anticipate them and we intentionally create these epiphany opportunities. These are intentional interventions where we are intentionally revisiting the story that made us fall in love in the first place. And we begin to get employees past those walls so that they can continue being engaged and being productive. Now, as in any relationship, we know that there are going to be more than one walls or hurdles to overcome. Communication or temperaments, personalities, for example, becomes another wall. When your employees maybe clash with the manager, or they find a misalignment between the company vision and their values. And at this point, as a company that is fully, purposefully engaged in the process, you already have a tactic, a strategy to overcome those conflicts so that epiphany by epiphany, you're able to get to the other side. So bottom line is that full engagement is really the ability to be fully present, focused, and energized, but it's really not just the employee. It's about the employer being fully engaged and anticipating that those walls are going to come up, that the hurdles are going to be there, and that you will already be prepared to tackle them at the different junctures of that relationship so you can have a long-term relationship that is thriving, that is changing for the better. Now, the employer engagement challenge is clear, and we already talked about it, that most of them believe that engagement and retention is a problem, but they don't feel that they have the right skills to address the issue. And the new hires engagement challenge is that they want to quit within the first 6 months because you have, as I said, the job offers are still coming in, they're still looking for opportunities, they're still unsure about their career path. So we need to know that we can bridge these gaps through epiphanies, through intentional strategies that are already in place before the walls come up. You can do this. So let's jump into the how. How can you do this? At a high level, epiphany bridges the gaps because epiphanies bring clarity for the employee. Also for you, the employer, because it leads to purposeful action. That strategy that is already in place when the walls come up. And when you implement purposeful action, you end up with engagement. Now, epiphany number one could be really employee input. And that is a key component of a strategy that works because employees who feel heard and understood are more likely to be engaged. But I am so surprised to hear that companies are still implementing quote unquote employee engagement initiatives without having tangible feedback from the employees. And quite frankly, that's where the gaps are. I think of my husband who every Saturday brings me flowers, and I am ashamed to say that sometimes I not even notice because I'm too focused on my work, but also because for me, being fully engaged in the relationship is really not about gifts or flowers, although they're nice, but it's more about quality time. And you can see that he can be doing the flower thing all day long, and I may still feel disengaged if we don't spend quality time. Well, the same is true for employees. Hearing what they have to say really allows you to bridge those gaps with actionable feedback because every successful engagement strategy is guided by actual quantitative and qualitative data that leads your actions, your purposeful actions. Now, what are those actions? Well, it depends on the feedback. It could be ongoing dialogue and communication, training, coaching, toolkits, maybe policies and procedures that support your strategy, employee care programs, employee appreciation programs, maybe even more feedback. It doesn't really make sense to just implement these type of strategies if you don't even know if that's what is needed in the culture. But when you are surgically precise on what you execute based on feedback, then the ROI is absolutely clear. We begin to rewrite the story, the number story, because savings across the board immediately begin to go up. Truly, the time is now to make changes. This is what a study of Deloitte said, 2017. Understanding and improving the employee experience is critical for companies operating in a highly competitive global economy. Providing an engaging experience will help companies succeed in attracting and retaining skilled employees. Now, this is easier said than done. Even executing an assessment, feedback strategy with employees can fall flat if you're not asking the right questions, if you are not ensuring that you're going to have a high response rate. What do you do with that data is a huge problem. I understand that. In fact, many of the companies that we work with are stuck in their strategy document, if they are even able to get to that document, because they don't have the capability or the technical knowledge to move that document beyond and execute in a way that is going to really yield the ROI. And then when it comes to execution, how do you make sure that it's sustainable? How do you make sure that you don't forget, the original vision for starting this in the first place? I talked to a company that we are looking to work with in the next few months, and they said that we started this process before, and then after sometimes we forgot about it, out of sight, out of mind. That is a common story. And that is a story that is very, very reversible. It's not impossible to change that story. But here's what I know for sure. I started out by talking about how when I came to this country, I was stuck in that sweatshop. That was my reality as a new immigrant. But here is what changed everything for me. And that was remembering one single phrase that my father shared with me when I was just growing up and he was teaching me how to play chess. Day in and day out, every time I wanted to quit just because I was losing all my pieces, he would show me that it takes only one move to change the momentum of the game. Bridging the gaps that I talked about is about those tiny little moves, pivot moves that can change the momentum of the game. Knowing when the walls are going to come up, knowing what to do when they do come up, and how to get your employees to the other side. That's what one move can do. And I would welcome the opportunity to have a conversation that addresses specifically your situation and your industry. Doug and I have a number of case studies and examples that can show you exactly how we do this in a variety of industries, in a variety of scenarios. We would love to hear from you and the specific challenges that you face and why haven't you been able to turn them around before, and to see if we can be your secret weapon, if we can be a good fit to work with you. But whether we are a good fit or not, I can promise you that in that conversation, you will walk away with more value. You will walk away with some ideas that you can implement right away. So I hope to talk to you soon, and I want to thank you for your time listening to this presentation.
So I want to just thank you for taking your time to be with us on this presentation today. You see the link down below. Go ahead and apply for that strategy session, and we'd love to talk with you further. Thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.